Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. We are here. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. Ack should be joining us any second. Let's start with Russ with the pre-show.
So let's talk about the NFL and the desperation of some teams to bring in players that you know are probably not going to work out. Mm-hmm. Tampa did it with Antonio Brown. I give him a couple weeks. Something will happen. He'll yell at Brady. Brady will yell at him. He'll say something to the GM or something on Instagram, and it'll be over. But now the latest one is even more puzzling. The Baltimore Ravens have invited in Dez Bryant.
Right.
Now, if you want to talk about a guy that, I don't know, he didn't prove it the last couple of years on the playing field and certainly was a pain in the neck. Now they're putting him on the practice squad. And, of course, he's going to go off the practice squad, right? I mean, there's no question he'll get time in a game or two.
Well, they're probably putting him on the practice squad because he's not 100% in shape. I would assume that's what it is. He'll work out for 2 or 3 weeks and then. Yeah. But okay, this is what I don't understand. Right now the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are rolling. Brady looks better than he has in a couple years. They've got weapons. Their defense is playing good. Everything is going great. And now you're going to basically throw this, cannonball into the swimming pool. And Antonio Brown, who's just a freak, and he's an idiot, and he just doesn't know when to shut up and when to just be a good teammate. And we saw that when he was with the Raiders, and we saw that when he was there for a week with the Patriots before he got booted off because of everything that happened. So, Jan, I don't get it. I don't understand why. I would assume that Brady is vouching for him because Brady wanted him in New England last year.
Well, I mean, if you listen to the GM, Tom knew nothing about this, and he had no part to play in it. Just ironically, Brown is going to be living at Brady's house, but Captain dripping.
Wow.
Look. Talent is talent. Talent will always get chances. Look, Antonio Brown worked his way from a 6th-round draft pick to become one of the better players in the NFL for a while. He was very good in Pittsburgh. And look, Pittsburgh had a rolling. I mean, you had Big Ben, you had Brown, and you had Bell. And those three, Ben will make the Hall of Fame. The other two would have been Hall of Famers, in my opinion, if they had stayed in Pittsburgh and just stayed with the system. But both of them wanted to branch out and go somewhere else. Look, Brown wasn't good in Oakland. We don't know how he would have worked out in New England, but if Brady and the room thinks that they can keep him, quote unquote, on the relative straight and narrow, he does have talent. And in the NFL, the margin of victory and defeat is very slim. And if you view that a guy could give you that edge and be the difference maker, even just to take attention away from somebody else and allow him to get open, they're going to have opportunities. Bryant didn't play particularly well in Dallas. He was great for a couple of years. We all know the blown call in the playoff game against Green Bay, which, was horrific even with replay. But he hasn't been good the last couple of years. But for them, look, Baltimore has a very strong room, and they have very strong leadership in the organization itself. And if Brian can't cut it, they'll let him go very quickly. But they view it as a worthwhile. If you look, Marquise Brown, really Mark Andrews is their best receiver. They've been vacillating between Mark Ingram and Dobbins in terms of running back. And Jackson hasn't had as good of a year this year as he had last year. So They are in need of some upgrade in talent. Now, whether or not Brian provides that, I don't know. But he's on the practice squad. You know what? If he's not cutting it, they'll just let him go. But
he'll make the team, and then that's when he'll do the most damage.
If he does something stupid, that room – look, Ozzie Newsome and those guys don't take any garbage in Baltimore. He will be gone in a heartbeat and move on without him.
There's no way that he would have agreed to go onto the practice squad unless they guaranteed him that he was going to make the team.
But he wasn't getting any chances anywhere else, really, right? So you have to recognize that you have a limited amount of chances and go from there.
Right.
I will say this. The last time I looked it up, Antonio Brown played for New England in a 43-0 rout of the Dolphins. Josh Rosen was the Dolphins quarterback, and he had a touchdown catch, and he had 3 catches that averaged 14 yards a catch. That's what we last left Antonio Brown with. So, and again, I don't think he's all of a sudden going to be streaking down the field and catching touchdowns for Tampa. So let's see what he does to the locker room, like you said.
Okay, I want to ask Eck this because Eck is a musician. Eck has recorded, has recorded albums. A number of them.
This sounds like a setup, Eck. Just so you know.
No. I want to ask his opinion on something. Because I sent the link to you, Russ, that Phil Collins has requested, put a cease and desist order on the Trump campaign because they're using "In the Air Tonight" as like music as he walks up, or as part of the presentation. Act, do you believe that a musician has the right? Because I'm assuming like Trump's campaign, if they're using music, they're paying whatever rights that they would.
Yeah.
No, they're not. I thought
No, they aren't. I mean, it depends. I mean, I've never played. All I know is like we actually, when during the John Kerry Bush elections, his Edwards was his vice president. Remember him?
Oh yeah.
Edwards,
we actually did 3 shows playing opening for him while he was touring around on the East Coast. So I got a little, and we didn't get paid anything. It was almost like it considered, and I know that's a little different, but at the same time,
we're talking about music being pumped into the thing, because I would assume they're paying like what ASCAP.
I mean, you're supposed there is a technical thing that, you know, if you play music in a club or anything like that, or a dance thing, you're supposed to pay for it, right? But that's always ignored. It's hard to really chase that down or anything like that, and it is such a little amount that it's not worth chasing down. You know, that's the problem with, you know. I mean, I could go in forever for this, but you know,
it looks like Trump did pay. It looks like he did pay Neil Young, not Neil Young, but for Neil Young's music. I can't figure out if he's paid for the other.
I mean, they may have paid. I'm telling you, it's so little, and
because I'll give you a brief example, and then we'll start the show. I remember there was a big thing back in the day where the Pretenders, or Chrissie Hynde, was asking for them to not allow Rush Limbaugh to use her. I think it's called, the song is called "Back in Ohio," as his theme music, and he used it. And the solution was he cut it off before she started singing.
There is like a limit to how long you can do it too. Without
he's got it on
television. Television is a different thing altogether, right? Yeah. So that's its own world, and to like, for the Simpsons to get anybody's music or anything like that, I know is very, very pricey. That's a totally different world. And as is movies, like we've had songs. We had like 3 of our songs on I don't know if you remember the show Dawson Creek, but on that soundtrack,
of course.
And we had songs in other movies. And then one's it was fun, and the television stuff was way better than even the movie stuff. Because we had it on a trailer one time, so that's different than movies too. So there's all different realms. But the reality of this situation is, they're kind of you're kind of up a creek as far as getting him to stop playing it, because
it's only a week to go too. But
right, and anyone can play your music in, like, say in your yard or whatever. Like
that's true. All right, so here's a good one, Eck.
Yeah.
So Eddie Grant, who wrote Electric Avenue, sued Trump recently last month because he did a video.
That's different.
It's right. And it doesn't seem like he's been paid for that.
Or putting it into a tweet or something like that is different.
I didn't know Eddie Grant was still alive. Wow.
Right. No, so not only is he still alive, but now this was used in a video in the background.
All you can really do is, like, so say, all they can really do is make it public that they don't want it played, that they're not endorsing him. That's like the best thing you can do. And when in this situation, because it's like, if your neighbor across the street started playing music, if he started playing music across the street of my music, which would never happen because they're 1,000 years old and don't like us, but if they were, I couldn't say to tell them to stop doing it necessarily. If they're just playing it in their backyard or whatever, I could say, but if it was too loud,
Twitter took down the tweet because it says that it stopped promoting the tweet because the owner complained about the copyright. So at least Twitter stopped.
I'll just say Phil Collins has got a lot of lawyers' fees right now, because besides the cease and desist, he's got a situation going on with his ex-wife, but we won't go into that. Okay, let's start. And
I think more than anything else, Phil Collins just wanted to get out there. He's not happy. This is a chance for Phil Collins to get out there and say he doesn't endorse Trump.
Exactly. Michael in the chat.
They're going to be on tour next year too. So
why don't you answer Michael in the chat? He asked something about your music.
Where's Michael? You can purchase my music on iTunes. It's on Spotify if you don't want to pay any money to. It's I'll put
the subscription, but
I'll put the name of the band into the.
That's not a good way to sell.
It's trying to make you at least 60.
I appreciate it, Mike. I put it in Gray Glances. I put it into the chat room too, if you wanted to. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff. It's out there.
If I sold my books that way, I would never sell any.
Well, you just hold your books up on
this is the thing, but different with you and your books, right? Like, if it sells on iTunes, we see very little as well.
Right. I mean, that's true.
So, it's a little tricky. So the idea is, we hope it brings people happiness and stuff like that. And when we play live, we make money. That's usually that's pretty much how bands look at it now.
Yeah. No,
unless you're giant. Like, of course, if you're like Taylor Swift and you sell a bazillion albums on iTunes, you'll make money.
Right.
But anyway, that's that. All right, here we go. Let's begin. Today's date is Tuesday, October 27th. Hello, Hockey World. It's Tuesday, October 27th, 2020.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Jan Levine, and it is the 34th anniversary of Game 7, 1986.
Which nobody talks about Game 7. They only talk about Game 6.
Bruce Hurt.
Russ Cohn from Sportsology.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching the Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. We're going to start today with an interesting thing. I wrote about it today. I've got my last 3 blogs I'm going to touch on in different ways today because they're all rumor related somewhat. Right. But the first one is today, and I was talking to a source last night, and I put the whole little bit of the text chain in my blog about the concept of what are these teams going to do if they, are we in danger of losing teams? That's something I'm really worried about. I've heard people talk about it a lot. Something that I think is bigger than is being made. And I was wondering why it's not being made bigger. Like why the NHL isn't making a bigger deal out of this. Because if we have to play a season without people in the seats, and stuff like that, or if we have to play most of the season without people in the seats, there are some teams that just can't afford it. They can't afford to do it. They can't. Right. There's just no way they can do it. It costs too much money to actually do that part of it. I mean, there's insurance. There's all kinds of stuff that has to be paid.
Right.
So I asked him what was going on, and he said the NHL was pretty much hunkered down to be able to protect these teams for this year and the next year, and then after that, he said it could get crazy. The feeling is that this year of we'll call it the 2021 season, since it's probably going to only be played in 2021. Is going to be, they're hoping, the last time they have to play without fans before vaccines in the 2021-22 season and the 2022-23 season, with the 2021-22 season, which is Seattle's entry.
Heck, I don't know if you heard the latest on the vaccine, but Fauci basically said it will take away the symptoms, but it probably will not cure you from the virus.
Right.
Right.
So even if they're allowed fans, will they have full stands? Even if they're allowed, will people risk it? That's a whole other question.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that's been coming out from the government recently, basically saying,
sure,
we can't control this virus. We can we're using therapeutics and we have vaccines, but it's basically going along with what Fauci is saying. Is like that there's no real way right now other than wearing masks and social distancing,
limiting everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And even if it was going to do so, not everybody's taking the vaccine immediately also.
Right.
So
we're not in a world.
Better term, a bleed-in period, for lack of a better term, that people will be able to get comfortable and people start taking it more and more, depending on the after effects.
Yeah, I do think that that's very, very likely. The other thing I think you're going to see, and I've already talked to a couple of you about this, is these indoor arenas like the Wells Fargo Center and places like that, making major investments in ventilation systems that that filter air. That do their. Right now they have nice systems and all that stuff, but we're talking about like major like HEPA filter type situations where they have, and that's not perfect, of course, but some kind of situation that filters the air as much as you possibly can filter it.
Keep the doors open.
Yeah, keep the doors open. Everything you can do.
Oh, I'm sure. Look, they're gonna be trying all of that.
So let's just begin for a second.
At the beginning, they're not going to have sellouts.
They're not going to have sellouts, but they're going to. But anything is better than nothing. So they're going to start seeing people in the seats again, if not this year at all, which they're hoping still for this year, by the playoffs and stuff like that. They're still hoping. The feeling is by the playoffs, maybe they'll be able to get people in. Well, right, they're not going to be all that excited to go in.
Well, to go along with what you started with here, I mean, I know that Eugene Melnick said, and I'm paraphrasing here. He basically said, if there are no fans in the stands, we're not going to play, or I don't want to play because basically, he can't afford it. He says we get 6,000 fans in the stands. That'll be more than we usually have. Ha ha ha. But there are a number of teams that if you don't have the revenue from tickets, they can't survive. And we were talking yesterday about the fact that, could you see a situation where, 6 or 7 teams say, okay, we're just shutting down for the year, and the league this year is a 24-team league. And Russ was talking about.
We talked about that, yeah.
Yeah, Russ was talking about almost like a version of the Canadian Assistance Fund years ago, where the league funnels money to these teams to keep them going. And I mean, yeah, I get that, but I don't know if they can do that if the number of teams that are dependent on revenue from tickets being, in the digits.
Well, that's sort of what I was talking about with my source, because when he said to me, he said the NHL is pretty much prepared to keep everybody okay through the first season Seattle's in, so 2020.
Yeah, see, I don't know if they're going to be able to go that long. I could see them doing it for this season. Well, I don't know if they'll be able to do that for 2 seasons. Even their projections could be wrong. We have to.
Their projections could be wrong, and we don't know. I mean, and the reality is, but this is. I'm just talking about the plan at this point, and whether or not they were going to be able to pull this off or not, who knows? But
yes,
the NHL has tons of contingency plans always. But this year, like he put it, there are contingency plans on top of contingency plans. Like we don't everything's so. There's always a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10-year plan for the NHL. They have these things in place. And what happens if this happens? What happens if that happens? If we have a work stoppage, now we have Bryant. If we have another pandemic, who knows? Whatever happens, all these things have to be in place. So he said he felt the NHL felt pretty secure and has pretty much calmed their teams down for the most part about this concept of, if we don't have any fans in this season, we're gonna have to fold. That they feel like they can make enough. They have enough money in there. They have enough abilities. They have a new contract coming up. New television contract, which they're thinking is going to be bigger because their numbers are way bigger than when they signed the original contract. So there are certain things that have to make sense. But he said, but after that, after Seattle's first season is when he thinks we could see some teams really be in trouble. Because if we don't have fans, full fans, or even some fans or whatever in 21-22 season, then we're looking at teams that are really going to be in trouble. And the concept there is, at that point, he said, there are 3 teams, he said, and he wouldn't tell me the 3 teams. We could probably guess them. But but he wouldn't tell me the 3 teams.
Arizona,
Ottawa,
Florida.
Would be my 3 guesses too. I would think that would be a pretty safe one to guess. But he said that there's absolutely a possibility that the year after Seattle enters, we will have a team moving someplace else just to play.
I think we're going to have multiples.
I think you could have 2. I think you could have 2 teams. And Russ and I were talking before the show about this. And obviously, the one that makes the most sense with Arizona, especially if they're, now supposedly they have stable ownership now, but again, I've heard that song one too many times.
So nobody with that kind of money is gonna lose money like this,
No, but the thing is the renewed talk of them needing a new building and all that stuff. They're not. I think that's barking up the wrong tree in Arizona. That we've been down that road 120. There's nothing wrong with that building, but I've been in it. It's a fine facility, but.
Try to finance the building of a new building right now.
Right, exactly. Forget it. But I mean, there has always been talk about Houston, and if you think about the fact that
Arizona, they're retrofitted already.
Right, Arizona is moving into the Central Division next year with Seattle coming into the Pacific. So geographically, moving Arizona to Houston fits more with the Central, with Dallas and St. Louis and Chicago. Yep. So that would make sense. And the other one, obviously, is either Florida or Ottawa to Quebec City, as you talked about, Ek.
Quebec City is the one I hear. I'm sorry, just
no. But yeah, I mean, Russ, Ottawa to Quebec City makes the most sense. But I think we mentioned before, the political fallout of that, moving a team out of the Canadian capital. You wonder how the Canadian government will react to that.
I don't think it's so bad, and not to get cut off for any restaurant. I don't think it's so bad in that the fact that you have, Ottawa is supposedly like half French, half English, total mixture of the cities. You're not coming from like Winnipeg to Quebec.
No, it's a transient town too. It's a government town, so a lot of people from other provinces are living there.
Right, and it's not that far from Quebec. So it's really it's doable that you could have that be something that could work. I mean, it's not close to Quebec, but I'm just saying it's not like you're still it borders Gatineau, which is a Quebec town, right? So, but right over the river from Ottawa is Gatineau.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at, you're right on the border of Quebec and Ontario over there with Ottawa. So yeah, to me, this is a really, so I think, I would see that happening too. And perhaps, I don't know where Florida would move if Florida was the team that would move.
Yeah, that's the wild card.
Houston, I mean, he brought up Houston, they brought up Quebec, and he brought up Kansas City, Kansas City to me is always, it was such a bad experience there for the NHL. They're terrified of it. But
and I don't think the ECHL did well there at all.
Yeah, I mean, but that is the ECHL, right? So it's hard to tell.
I mean, come on.
We're presuming that Houston's going to be better, right? So if you're going to move a team, you're moving a team permanently, right? So you talked about a 1-year option because of issues with the pandemic. Once you've opened that Pandora's box, you're not closing it. You're moving.
Yeah, these would be permanent.
You can't go, we're moving you for a year, we're then going to move back. I don't think either locale will work in terms of that determination.
Houston will work. Houston got a lot of
if you're moving there, you're staying there. You're not going, hey, we're going to move you.
I get it.
Back.
They have an arena that's perfect.
I know.
They have a lot of people in the city. They have like the 9th or 8th best TV audience. They're ready.
Yeah, let's go to Atlanta. Let's go to Hartford.
No, but I could see looking at a city like Portland. Portland's always been one where it's kind of like
Milwaukee.
I don't know.
The Admirals. I mean, but I don't know if they're going to draw for as an NHL team there. That's the problem, right? I mean, and they look at Hartford was because it was a WHA team, and that's why they ended up moving there. And there was a lot of negotiations at the time as to
but nobody stayed
they were going to bring into the league.
Everybody goes home to the suburbs. Nobody stays in that city. It's not going to just magically change.
You have your top tier of where the NHL could go, which is Quebec, Houston, Kansas City. You put in there.
But Eck, let me read this report before you do that.
Yeah.
So as of September 19th, Arena Digest had reported that the Coyotes hadn't paid their rent due. That was June 30th. And apparently they pulled in $1.9 million in revenue last fiscal year. And the city would get half of that. So it's around $640,000 after taxes and stuff like that. So they haven't paid that.
I know.
So I don't see how the NHL is going to pay that for 2 more years and these 2 other teams. I don't think they're going to do it for that long.
Well, they're withholding payment because they're trying to get a better deal. But it's like, how many times are you going to try to get a better deal? That's what I'm saying. It's just pay it.
I mean, we also talked about before, and I think this is a distinct possibility too, of states stepping in and helping in these situations and saying, okay,
but Arizona, I think, is done helping.
Yeah, I probably are, but I'm just saying that's the other possibility. And of course, they haven't paid that, but it behooves the arena to have the Arizona Coyotes there too. So it's like they can work this. They surely, the people who own the arena understand why the Coyotes didn't pay it. It makes total sense that they ran into this situation, and they don't want to lose the Coyotes and all those dates. That's a big thing. So they can work out something there. I think, and as much as they haven't paid it, and I agree that it's a mess. I don't think you're gonna see them leave for that reason necessarily.
Yeah, but if you do that, then why isn't Phoenix going to work out a better deal for their arena? Or why aren't the Diamondbacks going to work right? So you open up a can of worms that you don't know where to draw the line. So arenas, look, there's been lots of studies in terms of the economic impact if teams move or not, and I think they've proven that it's probably it. While the viewpoint is that it impacts them substantively, the impact they've determined is not as great as you might imagine.
Right.
So I don't know if they've taken into effect the impact on all the other businesses that are in the area losing that potential revenue, right? And that's where all the arenas that have built up infrastructure surrounding the stadiums are the ones that are the benefit, right? So you've been to Jersey, all the bars and everything else around that arena. Yeah. Same thing, and obviously in New York and everywhere else. The more infrastructure, the more capacity you have for things to be done after the game, you have a better shot of maintaining a team in a location because of the fact that it has a much more material revenue impact.
And that's always better in cities. It's always better in cities where they're putting it naturally in the middle of the city and not trying to build like a fake city around it, which we've seen.
Right. Here's the other problem.
With Arizona's got like a fake city around it.
Right. Here's the other problem with Arizona. So, the Cardinals got a new stadium a year or 2 ago. The Diamondbacks have had all kinds of problems. They are asking for a new stadium as well. And if the state is going to choose, they're going to choose baseball over hockey.
Yeah, and I think that the big thing is, like how invested is the state in hockey? That's the big thing, and I think you're right about that. I don't think it's obviously not a huge investment. It's getting bigger for sure, and it's growing, but it's not
but not to the degree minor league baseball is entrenched in that city.
Yeah, like Dallas has a much more of an investment. Dallas is, even though they have, the Cowboys are huge, the Rangers are huge. Dallas has, and the Mavericks of course are huge. The the Stars are very big in that city now, and they have a great youth hockey program and all that stuff, which is playing into future revenues, future fans, all that stuff. So yeah, I think that and I think that with the Stars going to the Stanley Cup Finals this year, that definitely raised hockey in Texas in general.
The move to Glendale was bad for the Coyotes. The same way the move from the country to Beverly Hills for the Clampets was bad.
Oh Jesus!
I'm not sure if I equate the one to each other. I mean, the interesting part is, look, you talked about the Diamondbacks wanting a new stadium, which I'm not sure what the problem is with Chase Field. But look at Atlanta. Atlanta built the stadium basically for the Olympics. And then after about 15 years, they're already bitching and moaning that they need a new stadium, which they got SunTrust Park that got built for them.
And Turner Field was nice.
Where they are now.
There was no problem with Turner Field. I was there. It was nice.
Yes.
See, I always question the rumors of Kansas City, not because we know, I think Philip Anschutz owns the building, so it's like, and it's a building that's been sitting in the middle of nowhere for like 15 years. So I just don't think it's viable because I don't think there's a market there. But yeah, I keep going back to Milwaukee. Milwaukee is geographically in between Chicago and Minnesota, Wisconsin. The University of Wisconsin. There's a lot of history in terms of hockey there. I think it would be viable, and I'm not sure whether the Milwaukee Bucks building is capable of holding a.
I think they were looking for a new place.
Is pretty simple because I've talked to people about this over the years.
They were looking for a new place too, weren't they?
They just built it.
They did. Okay.
I think they just opened a new arena not that long ago, if I remember correctly, from Milwaukee.
If you've noticed, original six teams are very good at keeping expansion teams away from them.
Yeah.
Chicago and Milwaukee are not far from each other.
It's a couple hours.
The Leafs have made an art form of it. Let's put it that way.
That is, and the Rangers, although they've allowed two teams to come into their market,
they got a lot of money.
Yeah,
they got a lot of money.
There will never be a second team in the Toronto area. Never in Hamilton.
There we go.
Never in Brampton.
Why did we open up this Pandora's box?
Never, ever, ever.
No, I mean, and the big one, the closest I've heard anything to coming in the Toronto area has been Markham, right? Which is Markham is north, an hour north of Toronto?
About that, yeah.
Okay, so that's the closest I've heard. I mean, there are other places for sure in Canada, and that people have talked about Saskatoon, of course, a lot.
But these are, I don't know if they're big enough markets. I mean, like Mike talked, Milwaukee is a big market. Now, granted, don't know what it would do hockey-wise and whether or not it would draw, but in terms of you have rivals with Minnesota, you'd have rivals with Chicago immediately. You've had a minor league hockey team there in the past and still do. Now I don't know what they would do in terms of that because I think the Milwaukee Admirals, I'm not sure if they're still there or not, but they were there in the past, which is a Pittsburgh organization. So they have had hockey in the past. So there is potential for that to exist. If you're thinking about towns, Kansas City, I mean, clearly Quebec is, I think, number one. We talked about Portland, but now that I'm not sure how quickly they're moving back to the Pacific Northwest once Seattle comes on board, because you're already going to have a team there. You're not moving another team there in immediately. That's for sure.
Right.
Naturally,
the problem is, like in the past, okay, when if this sport was what it was, say 15 years ago, 20 years ago for sure, when they were mainly driven by gate revenue completely. I mean, they're still driven by gate revenue, but they didn't have any television for a while there.
Right.
Then places like Halifax or or Regina or places like that made more sense because you could sell them out. There's no question you could sell them out. They're not giant markets, but getting 20,000 season tickets sold wouldn't be a real big deal.
No, but it's just the Canadian dollar is the big deal.
I think
dollar is a big deal. But the other thing is then when you're actually going to sell your television things, so you go to I'm not somebody explained to me years ago, like you go to NBC and you say we want money for the hockey contract, and the NBC, and you have teams in Winnipeg and Halifax and Regina, and the issue there is suddenly NBC saying, well, we're going to have the Stanley Cup final, right? You're going to have definitely the Stanley Cup final. Well, what if one of the teams is from Winnipeg, in the Stanley Cup final? What if one of the teams, and that's nothing against the cities at all, we're just talking about the American marketplace, looking at that and being like, oh man, it's if it's not in an American city and it's a Canadian city, what's the interest going to be?
But the Raptors made the NBA final last season against Golden State, and even though they didn't have two markets to draw ratings from, the ratings were pretty good, and it was
Toronto is almost an American city.
That's player driven there.
Right, but the market doesn't
count. You had Stephen Curry, you had Curry playing. You had Kawhi Leonard playing. So that's player driven.
But the point I was making is that the ratings for Canada don't count for ABC or ESPN.
Right. So that they don't like that. So that the NHL takes a risk on by going back to Winnipeg, and going from Atlanta to Winnipeg was actually a risk for that reason. This is when I had the discussion. I'll
say this: we're going to have a 32-team league next summer when Seattle comes in. The most I can ever see them have in terms of Canadian teams would be 8. So if an American team moved to Canada and say went to Quebec City, I think that's it. They're not going to move to Halifax because of travel problems, especially in the Maritimes. The weather sometimes can be bad. I don't see them going to any of these smaller cities like Regina or Saskatoon. I think 8 will be the max. And 25% of the league is not exactly bad.
Yeah, but the NHL is not going to go to Portland, Oregon.
No,
for a while.
Not immediately for sure. I mean, we're going to get to see how Seattle. Look, the first couple of years with Seattle, you're going to have that initial blush from having a new team. If they have the same trajectory that we've had with Vegas, then yes, they're going to draw. If they don't and they struggle, they're going to have to evaluate whether or not it makes sense to go. But the NHL is clearly lining their pockets because they got the expansion fee that they ended up paying to come into the league. And also, look, clearly gate revenue is still a driver because if not, all these teams that are complaining they don't have any money coming on board, if gate revenue wasn't a material driver in terms of their overall revenue, then you couldn't use that as an argument. So clearly that's
still the number one driver.
Well, and the thing is that, we know that Gary Bettman has wanted to keep that team in Arizona because it's a massive media market. I think it's like 8th in the U.S.
Yeah, the same size as Philadelphia in media market size.
Houston is bigger. Houston is 4th or 5th. Yeah, so that's why I keep saying Houston. And
you'd have stable ownership there also, Mike, which is you'd have the NBA owners basically being a component there. Who know how to run an arena, know how to run a franchise.
Right, and it's a natural rivalry for Dallas, but it's not close enough to Dallas that it would take away from their fan base. So I think eventually, maybe not next year, maybe not in the year after, I think eventually some NHL team is going to move to Houston.
And you have history from the Aeros years ago, which they're going to call upon initially until the team becomes embedded within the infrastructure there. So.
The NHL really likes the 32-team concept, and getting beyond 32 teams, I think, is not something they want to do for a while.
Yeah, I was
thinking they're expanding again.
They're not adding teams for a long time.
They'll migrate teams again, but the problem once you migrate, look, if they move out of Arizona, I don't know if and when they're ever going back there.
Well, the question is, obviously with them taking a shortfall right now and obviously struggling financially, whether there would be motivation to expand further because it's $500 million a team. But if they charge these teams a fee to transfer, and I don't know how much that would fly, but the league needs money. They probably would want something for these owners to approve a transfer from one city to another.
Yeah, but
it's not $500 million a team. It's obviously it's like $500 million. It's $500 million expanded.
It was 1976 for the last time in Kansas City, so it's been a while.
Yeah,
but again, if you have to prop up teams and the league is forced to pay, right? If you're not necessarily put in that situation and they're bringing in revenue, you offset the two. It may be beneficial for them to allow them to move, just because you're not going to have to worry about taking money out of your own pocket, and they'll be generating revenue, which impacts the league overall. And you get another major media market, which the league can sell.
Okay, so here's another thing. In the chat room, they're writing, Bettman hates moving teams. That's true. But when all this happens, Gary Bettman may be retired for all we know.
Yeah, Bettman's time, he's getting up there, and
so that's the other factor that you can't factor in Gary Bettman now for this.
But I don't think if Bill Daly would be the natural person to follow him.
Yeah, no question.
I don't think that I think he shares very similar views and definitely has been mentored by Bettman to the point. Bettman's biggest issue is moving teams. I was told moving teams that won a Stanley Cup. They refuse to do, which is why the Islanders have been considered pretty safe to stay there for, even in situations that we've gone through recently. They don't want to move it. They feel like, and Carolina, the same thing. They feel like once you win a Stanley Cup, that puts you in that city, that entrenches you in that city.
Sure, but there's no worry for the ones we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
Unless you're going to count the Stanley Cup for Ottawa like in 1900 whatever.
Right.
Modern era, Russ.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. So the other thing I want to do.
Well, let's hold that one. Let's talk about the contracts that were signed today.
We had a couple contract signings. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. The first one we talked about a little bit yesterday was Josh Hosang. He avoided arbitration. He signed a 1-year deal, $700,000 AAV NHL level, but boosted his salary from $70,000 to $225 in the AHL, which just tells you the agent realizes, Russ, that he's probably going to either play in Bridgeport or some other AHL team, and that's where he's going to make his money if the AHL even plays.
Right. That's the key part of the negotiation is really the 225. The Islanders are not putting him in the lineup. Not that he doesn't deserve to be given a shot, considering how their offense is, but he's not going to be given a shot. So he did this so he could make top dollar in the AHL, and that's the best he could do right now. I think his agent did a good job, actually.
Yeah,
I do too. I really do. I think it's a good signing.
And Jan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, we know Ho-Sang has offensive talent. He just hasn't meshed with the organization in terms of from a chemistry and an attitude perspective. And until they're either he changes his tune a little bit, but more so until the organization is willing to give him that opportunity, he's in essence going to be buried in the AHL. Though the Islanders have struggled to score offensively. I don't think systemically that's the best fit for him, given the style of play that he utilizes. So I don't know. Plus also, but they're not going to get much on the market for him, right? So they're caught in a kind of a catch-22 with him. So he's kind of stuck there, at least for another year.
Right. And the other one was much bigger news, was the 4-year contract for Devin Taves with Colorado, $16.4 million for 4 years, 4.1 AAV. It's backloaded, so he gets almost $6 million in the last year of the deal. And Russ, I look at this and I just shake my head when it comes to the Islanders, because they gave up what I consider top 4 defensemen. They got a couple second-round picks, which, is not a bad return, but this guy was one of their better defensemen, and they just simply couldn't afford him.
Yeah, this is Joe Sakic. I give him a slow golf clap for this because he got more defensive depth.
Yeah.
Like we talked about off air, that contract will replace Ian Cole, and it's a big speed upgrade and offensive ability upgrade, but just puck movement upgrade. Because even if Taves isn't relied on, and he probably won't be the same way he was for the Islanders, he's still fast, still a good puck mover, still a good defenseman. So this is a way to get younger, stay younger, and have a great decor in a modern era of the NHL, and the Islanders basically gave him away. I don't care about the second-round picks. I don't even know. One of them was 2022, right? I mean,
yeah, I think so, yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, who the hell knows in 2022 how that's going to impact the Islanders, but this is going to impact Colorado today, and this is going to keep them in the race, and the Islanders should have had a better plan.
Yeah. No,
So-
for sure.
Well, the Islanders' problem is, as we've talked about before, right? They have an enormous amount of contracts. They can't really move, right? Boychuk's contract, you could even consider Letty's contract, Komarov's contract, Andrew Ladd's contract. Yeah. We also talked about what Cizikas is making. We've talked about what Clutterbuck is making. And if Taves was going to come in this amount, and granted, I think he is slightly overpaid. I was figuring more in the 3.25, 3.5 million range. 4.1 is a rather hefty spike. There's no way the Islanders could have fit this salary under their cap. But you think about it, if Devin Taves is getting 4.1 million a year, Ryan Pulock is going, okay, that number is going to start in the 5.5 to 6 range, is what I'm going to want in terms of a contract of a similar length. And the Islanders are going to have a struggle of time of fitting him in, especially when they got to sign Barzell as well. So they have a lot of contracts. Randy said Bailey. I think they like Bailey a bit more, and I think Bailey has a little bit of value. These other guys have less value in terms of trying to move them, which is why they couldn't get rid of them. So
I'll tell you what they
trying to fit Pulock in is going to be tough.
Here's what they could have done. Pulock doesn't have any real leverage, though. So he's going to get fit in however he's going to get fit in, and that's just the way that's going to be. Barzell has a little bit of leverage.
He's going to get a bridge, Ross.
Yeah, he's going to get a bridge, and so I don't worry about that. What they could have done is they could have dealt Varlamov, lost that salary, and just brought in a low-price backup, knowing that you have Sorokin, and go all in on Sorokin, and then you could have kept one of your best defensemen. That's what I would have done, because either way, you're gambling with either not having enough defense in front of a great goalie or just having a great goalie with good defense, which it would have been.
Yeah,
so that's what I would have done.
You would have had to eat salary, though, to get rid of Varlamov. He's making he's got 3 more years.
Right. It was
only $4 million.
It was the wrong year. It was the wrong year to shop.
People in the chat room, though, are saying what is actually, honestly, the case from what I heard is that Lou Lamoriello just didn't like him. I mean, the reality
because he didn't have particularly good playoffs. He made some key turnovers, which I thought is is an overreaction based upon what we.
I'm not saying it's not an overreaction. I'm just saying the reality is that you could see Lou reacting that way and saying, "Listen, this guy can't play in pressure situations. We're not going to keep him here. He wants that kind of money because he knew he probably wanted $4 million." He talked to somebody about it. He's like, "We're not keeping a guy that I don't really trust or like for $4 million a year."
I don't think it's that. I think it's what Funky just said. They have Noah Dobson and waiting in the wings, and Noah Dobson has got speed, and he's a good offensive defenseman. So I think they saw him coming in on an entry level contract for $2 million
for sure.
Yeah, but they have other declining guys on the blue line anyhow.
That's really it. I think it really.
Russ's argument with Varlamov is strengthened because then you have Sorokin coming in on an entry level deal, so you could just done the same.
Oh, I'm not saying Russ's approach is flawed. I'm just saying with all the goalies that were in the market, it was probably impossible to trade Varlamov. And
an entry level year deal, but he's a 1 year deal. You know, like something that's
a lower salary. I think he's making $2 million. So that's
right, but that's only for 1 year. And if he does become all the Islanders want him to be, it's a big contract you're gonna have to sign in the offseason.
But now you're still stuck with Varlamov still.
Yeah, Varlamov will be exposed to Seattle and probably traded next summer.
Can I ask a question? If he couldn't handle the pressure and everything else, why did he get the amount of minutes that he was getting in the playoffs?
And why did he lead them in defensive scoring?
Right.
So,
I don't
think it was that. I think he was simply.
I don't think it was that either.
They simply could not afford it.
I mean, I talked to people about this. They want that. That's what
I think it was a factor, especially since Dobson is sitting there.
I think it's a factor.
You don't have a safety net really behind Dobson now. I know everybody asked about Bodwile. Bodwile is not anywhere close to ready yet. And look, it could be a sweetener to move Boychuk, but $6 million, you better be giving a lot more of a sweetener than just Bodwile to try to move him. And look, I like Dobson, but defensively, I think moving them hurts him, especially as we've seen a declining play. Boychuk, Letty's definitely taken a step backwards. So that's a lot of reliance to place on a rookie coming on board. And I think they underestimate what Taves can mean to this team. And look, he'll fit in perfectly in Colorado.
Look, Wallstrom's doing really well right now overseas. It depends on what the Islanders' cap situation is as to whether he's going to play there this year or not. That's what I think.
And I'll tell you this: I was with Colorado, how they've managed this. We don't know what's going to happen this year, who's going to play or who's not going to play, or if there's going to be an AHL season or whatever. But they have 2 defensemen who everybody thinks are NHL caliber. One, Bowen Byram, the other one, Connor Timmins. And after this year, Cale Makar is going to hit it big in terms of a new contract. It will do them wonders to have those guys on entry-level contracts making less than $1 million to counterbalance what Makar is going to make, which is probably $7 or $8 million.
And this Taves deal it's reasonable.
Well, the Taves, like you said, Ian Cole's a UFA after this year. They have Taves now at $4.1 million for 3 years as a stable contract, along with Girard. And then they re-signed Makar. They probably expose Eric Johnson in the expansion draft. So I mean, they're just set up perfectly.
And they signed Graves also for about $3.25
as well. Graves too, yeah.
Right. So Cole goes. Byram or Timmins steps in for him. You have basically your blue line going to be locked up. And the other thing you need to figure out is they're going to have to re-sign Landeskog. So part of the money for Johnson is going to go towards Landeskog.
Landeskog is going to be a big time signing for them.
And I'll tell you,
it won't be massive because again, he's one of those guys that does a lot of things, but his scoring numbers aren't massive.
He is a UFA, and other teams would give him money. There's a chance.
But they've reserved money to be able to sign him. I'll tell you one thing we should start doing probably in the next couple of weeks is to look at each team and look who could be exposed in the expansion draft. Now that all these teams have signed players, because I mean with Colorado, I mean now they want to keep Graves. They've signed Taves. I think they have to protect Makar and then Sam Girard. They may go 8 skaters and one goaltender. They might protect the big 4, McKinnon and Landeskog if they sign him to a contract, and Rantanen and maybe Kadri or Comfer, and then they may go that way because they want to protect their defensemen.
Yeah, because if they have that kind of solid defense, it depends what they do this year too.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see what Taves is all about, in a situation like this, because it's a different kind of situation in New Jersey. He's not going to get the points that he got scoring wise because he's not going to get as much offensive time as he got in New Jersey for sure. So I think
in New York, he won't. But
sorry, yeah.
You know what though? But I've seen him play in college for Quinnipiac 5-on-5, he can be a very effective 5-on-5 guy. He's still going to get a certain amount of points.
I don't doubt that he's not effective. I mean, and I mean, obviously, I've seen him play. I've seen him. He did a really good. I thought he was really good for the Islanders in some of the games in the bubble and during the regular season. I was really impressed by him as well. His scoring definitely picked up in the offseason. But I've had the fortunate ability to be around like general managers like Lou Lamoriello when he's watching a game, watching a game. And I can just hear him in my head, and I was told this by other people that this is how it was, but I can hear him in my head, saying, that who made that mistake, that Taves guy again made. Look at another mistake. You can just see, and it doesn't take a lot of those to and and I'm not saying it's not a reaction. I'm not saying it's not, logical necessarily. Sometimes some GMs, and Lou's definitely one of them, goes with his gut, he goes with his gut on things. And something about this player wasn't worth, he knew he was going to get $4 million. So it's not worth $4 million to me. That's what he's saying. Because I got to sign Sorokin. I still don't have Barzal signed. I still don't have, Martin signed. There's a bunch of things that
all you're doing is continuing to put pressure on Trotz that eventually could be too much if they don't have enough scoring, weakening that defense.
Russ, I think
the flip side is arguing the contracts that he did sign players to.
Right,
which now have not particularly aged well. So it's on both sides of the coin there.
Well, the Komarov contract is an albatross around his neck.
And the big contracts that they were from before.
But he's not responsible for Boychuk, and he's not responsible for Ladd. And what's going to probably end up happening? He's going to probably have to give a first-round pick to Seattle to take one of those guys off of their roster. That's probably what's going to have to happen, because otherwise, who's he going to expose? Is he going to expose Josh Bailey or somebody else making $5 million? It'll give him cap relief, but you're losing a good player. So I mean, you have to get those boat anchors off of your roster, because you have to pay other players that are producing.
Just something I want to pat myself on the back for. Everybody's going to have to hold up on this one. Anton Lundell just had a 4-goal game. Now the knock on Anton Lundell, people kept saying, is he's not a scorer, but I said to people after I'd spoken to him that he basically said he didn't shoot enough. His dad's a goalie, and his dad has taught him how to read goalies, read their tendencies, and figure out how to, put the puck in net. He started to score more at the end of last season. And so I did try and get that word out there that this guy can score, and he's doing it on his own. So Florida, you got a good pick, man.
Yeah, it was a really good pick. Okay, so moving on to another kind of weird thing. Besides, last night I wrote about the RFAs and stuff like that for next year, which is a really crazy RFA class. We can get to that at another point, but I wanted to touch base on this other thing because it came up again today, and that is the concept of expanding the outdoor games this coming year, which everyone thinks is ridiculous, right? But it's not. It is definitely it's definitely in the contingency plans of the NHL to possibly do this. And the concept being, they've got right now they call it one setup, or two setups. I think they have two complete setups actually.
As revenue generators.
And the concept of putting an outdoor arena into a city for 2 weeks, having them play 6-7 games in those 2 week periods outside like that, and then moving it to another place 2 weeks later, basically starting in the South, because we're talking about January, February, moving it slowly north, or moving the 2 week period northern as we go along, giving them depending on how many seats they can sell, depending on how much social distance you have to be, you're talking about 100,000, 120,000 tickets maybe, in that situation for 6 games. That's even
in the South outside. No, it's not.
There's the problem, Aki. It's you talk. Okay, if you're talking about doing it in Florida or Texas or Arizona, where they're allowing mass fans.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then, but we don't know where this virus is going to be in January.
We don't know where it's going to be. I'm
not even going with that. I'm going with, if you go back to the Winter Classic that was in Dallas, right? I think they negotiated a better deal for the lesser stadium because Jerry Jones got a little greedy. But at the end of the day, that was a one-off. You're not going to be able to get all these fans to fill the stands that many times for these outdoor games. For one-off, fans are willing to do it. Maybe even for 2. Once you go over that, they're not going to be willing.
I thought the same thing, Russ, and I brought up the same exact point. I'm like, there's going to be a malaise about this. You can't, but their thinking is basically telling the fans, listen, these are your home games for the year. These are the ones. This is all you're going to get. This is possibly all you're going to get for the entire season to see your team live. So over the course of those 6 games, how many fans? Will 10,000 fans go to all of them? Probably.
I mean, look, I go back to the games that they had at Yankee Stadium for Rangers, Devils, Rangers, Islanders, right?
Yeah,
that would work in the Northeast, and some of those games were miserable. Weather was miserable. Wind, some snow.
Weather is, of course, a factor.
I mean,
Winter Classic was freezing against the Sabres. I can tell you that much. I was at all 3 games. But so are you doing it? So you've talked about, right, this is going to be your home games. Or is the viewpoint is that every single home locale is going to have an X number of outdoor games in order to come up with the revenue? You also have to figure out the cost in order to fit the stadium to do that, which is not necessarily going to be cheap either.
Well, the setup that they have now, they fit pretty easily into baseball or football stadiums. Definitely better into football stadiums, than baseball stadiums. And they have 2 setups now, so you can do 2 of these at a time, I was told. But that's not to say that they couldn't. Each of them is about $25 million, something like that. They're expensive setups, but they could get a couple more.
Is that including the $1 million setup for the machine?
Yeah, that's including like a whole thing from what I heard. It costs $25 million in this. No, I mean the. Are
you generating that much revenue?
It doesn't include that, Russ. I'm talking about just the hardware stuff.
All right, let's just say it's 26 million. I'm going to do some math. All right.
Yeah, and you're not including what it's going to cost in like Kevin was saying on Friday, the rent that the big house charged for Toronto, Detroit. He didn't say a specific amount, but he did say it was very costly. So that's
right.
You're taking that out of the profit that you're going to make, and then you're not even going to get 50% of the normal attendance. So
plus you need to have concessions and everything else open, which means you need to be paying those people and for other stadium workers as well. Not that it's an inordinate amount, but it's still a component of the overall cost associated with it. And how much you're charging per ticket, how many fans can you get in the building, all that is a big piece of it.
There are 100. There's 100 workers in there, each of them making maybe $50 for the day, or something.
But let's say it's
really not that.
Let's say it's $150 a game for 100,000 in seats. It's still only $15 million a game.
Right. So you're talking that, and you're talking like they don't expect that. It's not. We wouldn't expect 100,000.
No. But I'm giving you that example. So if you had,
but that you're talking about 6 games, then you're talking about. I don't know what 6 times 15 is.
But if you have 3 games, you'd make 45 million. You subtract your 45 from at least your 25.
Your 25. No, the 25 is the initial cost to have the.
Okay, but I'm taking out the cost. So now that's 20 million, and maybe there's a
set of things. So once you have the set, you move them there. They keep them at. They keep. Once you have the setup, you move it to another place. It's probably $1 million, whatever, to set it up each time. That's all you're going to be paying because you're going to. It's a matter of owning the refrigeration and all that stuff we're talking about.
Yeah. See, there is some money to be made, but that's at the best case scenario with you selling 100,000 each game, which isn't going to happen. They're lucky if they pull out a couple $1 million.
Yeah,
it's not worth it for that.
Yeah, I mean, it is and it isn't. It is in terms of it's something for some teams that are getting nothing, and it also does give your fan base something that that you can build around, perhaps.
Russ, what they might be if this is actually going to happen, what this might be is this is to fund those teams that are, I'm sure like big market, big money teams like Toronto and New York and Philadelphia do not want to pay to keep Arizona and poorer teams alive. But if they can generate enough money to keep those teams going by playing outdoor games, then what the hell? Why not?
You have to be concerned about the good of the league as a whole, right? So you can be as upset that you're funding them, but if you don't have them, you're not going to have a league.
I agree.
The other piece of the puzzle you have to factor in is, look, they'll make money on parking because they're going to charge for parking, right? You'll make money from concessions. The figure, though, is if you have $100,000 stadium, I don't think you're going to fit 100. I'm going to go, let's say, with 60, and let's say you're getting a quarter, maybe you're getting 15 in games. Right. Let's say you net in the range of $100,000 for the 6 games in terms of number of tickets sold. That's got to be your baseline before you're factoring ticket costs and everything else associated with it.
Right. I mean, the other issue
I think that they're making now, but it's an awful lot of effort for a not great profit.
I mean, it depends on the profit. It depends on how many people you can get in. It depends on the excitement you're looking to generate. It depends if there's going to be any games.
Well, the excitement will go from here to here as you have more of them. We saw back in the day when there were.
But I don't think so. That goes from here to there with more of them as far as watching on TV. But every time it shows up at a new city, the excitement.
Yeah. When it shows up in a new city, that's fair. But the other thing is, we're also talking about pie in the sky everything. It's sold out. They're getting the right ticket price, and the weather is good enough. We didn't even take into account if one of these games got postponed, what would happen?
No, I mean,
are you bringing in 6 different opponents also? Is I guess what we figuring that also, right? Are you facing each team twice?
I think
are you bringing in 6 different teams to do it?
Probably like each team twice. It'd probably like bringing in 3 opponents from your division, play them twice type thing. I would guess. And also bringing in teams that are close enough to your place that those fans could travel to the games as well. In certain situations, like obviously in the Northeast here, I can travel within 5 hours or 6 hours, within 6 hours to like 7 teams. So the idea is, there's different people could travel to different places, and you get that benefit of it as well. I think there's, I'm not saying it's a glorious plan, but what I am saying is it's a plan, something they've discussed. And
right, are you going to pay $150 a ticket to do it at a minimum?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think the goal would be to make tickets less and sell more. You try to sell more.
Well, depends on in other words, I understand that, but your capacity is going to be limited based upon what each stadium is going to allow, right?
So yeah, exactly.
I'm guessing of an 80,000 stadium, let's say you're allowed 20,000, especially if you're talking the New York region, they're not allowing, and I don't know if they could allow it, period, based upon what's been discussed in terms of New York right now.
And everything changes we're talking January, February. So at the beginning for the Southern teams, so obviously you wouldn't do this in January, February, March in Winnipeg, like you gotta wait till the weather breaks a little bit before you get towards the end of the year. You're going to be up in the Winnipeg, Edmonton area where, we're talking about June, July, when it's doable, like that's a different.
But here's the other problem too. Even though you're outdoors, that Winter Classic last year had a lot of crowding problems because it was an older stadium. Even though it's massive, you are going to have problems. You obviously, even trying to space people out in the corridors and stuff, if you sell even half the stadiums, are going to be a challenge.
Yeah,
I think you're going to do a quarter. That would, if you're maintaining the same social distance requirements, you're probably going to do a quarter.
Right.
And I think you're still going to have difficulty. Look, people go to football games, as pointed out in the chat room, all the time. You have 80,000 people, 70,000 people going to every single football game. And I can tell you the tickets are also, especially in the lower tier, averaging that amount of 150 or more to go to games. Again, you're going to get hockey fans who are going to be willing to go. The question is they're going to have to factor everything's cost benefit, right? Are you generating enough revenue to make the exercise associated with this? And are you going to have a diminishing return as you get more and more? Now, the viewpoint is you're talking about if we're moving northward or we're moving southward or eastward. Are you doing it for every team? Is every team going to be having these outdoor games? How free? If you do, can you do 2 of them? Can you do 3 of them? Can you stagger it? What do you do from a ratings perspective? How many games can you have on TV? Obviously, there's an enormous amount of logistics. On the face of it, you figure you're going to generate some revenue enough to hopefully offset some of the losses that you have, because you're going to have nothing internally in terms of hockey arenas right now. So, but the thing is, you know what? You're going to have to make that determination. You're ready in almost November. You can't do this last minute, given the logistics associated with setting it up.
And right now, we were talking about earlier in terms of the NHL having contingency after contingency after contingency. I'm sure one of them is, okay, we're going to have a schedule based on starting January 1st, start January 15th, starting February 1st. It's impossible really, to really plan out outdoor games when you don't even know when the season is going to start. So, I could see them doing this when things get back to normal and say next year, just a number of outdoor games to generate revenue and I'm sure the players will be more than glad because that'll lower escrow. But I can't see what everything's so fluid right now.
Yeah, unless you're selling them in Canada, Mike's right in the sense that you need a certain amount of time to sell these stadiums out. They don't sell out overnight. Even at 25% capacity, it's not going to sell out in 10 minutes this time.
Whereas the only difference they'll say, though, is that most of these arenas are likely fallow right now, and you have, in other words, you don't have to worry about scheduling conflicts because
you don't have to worry.
Anything else is going on, right? So
the rent's not going to be expensive. Rent's not going to be expensive because those places have nothing.
Yeah, they'll drop the rent, sure.
Right. So, and again, but it is something where you're not going to have to worry about scheduling conflicts, which a lot of times is the big issue associated with trying to figure these things out. Right now, you're probably going to have places that may be willing to work with you because if it generates revenue for them, which is something they're not getting now, there's a benefit for those arena holders as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are. And I think when you look at the whole thing as it plays out, it wouldn't make sense to do it next year if things are back to normal, because the idea of it is to replace games without fans in them. Like right now, as I see it, I think I'm going to gamble still around January 15th to start. I think I'm like around that. I said January 18th before. I've heard that the Flyers are internally working around that date of January 18th.
Right.
So for what that's, that's worth. I mean, it could be earlier, it could be later, but that's where they're thinking. And then I also heard that, March 15th is when they're thinking about that they might be able to move fans back into arenas. I don't know. And they have no way of knowing. This is a contingency plan.
They're just guessing.
The 18th was something the NBA had talked about originally also, right? That was the date that they had their line in the sand and moved it forward. And if I remember correctly, the impact of doing it on December 22nd now is about $500 million, which is a substantive impact by moving it forward. NHL doesn't have that kind of revenue, but that is a substantive generator for them. But I still don't know how they're pulling off December 22nd, given what's going on right now.
Quick thing. So I see that Arthur Staple has put, Islanders possibly on the block, Patrick Laine interest. So the only way that could really happen is if Barzal's in the deal, because then this way the Islanders get a cost certainty out of Laine. But then again, Laine probably doesn't extend with the Islanders past that deal, and you're going to lose Barzal. Like, that's the risk.
He's an RFA
for how many more years, though?
2.
So you'll get him for 3 more years?
Yeah, but he's probably going to if he goes to arbitration, which he would be able to do after this contract, he's probably going to get what he's asking for on a long-term deal, which is like $8 or $9 million. So you defer.
You'll just get him for a shorter term, but you're eventually going to lose him, and you'll lose Barzal. But that, to me, that's the only way that deal works.
And we had talked about that a while before. I mean,
goal scorers getting that kind of money.
From Winnipeg's perspective, right? They get that future second-line center,
right,
or their potential future line center, depending on what happens with Scheifele. And another year or two, right? And they clear up some of the logjam at wing. So those names have been names I think they've been tossed about previously as possible options as a kind of a 1-for-1 deal. But Lamoriello, that's still going to cost him a hefty figure down the road when it comes to Laine. It's not like he's going to be substantively cheaper at all.
No, but term-wise, he'll be better off. But you know what? At that point, they'll have a new stadium that's filled, and they won't need it as much. But again, to me, I would never make that deal because Barzal is going to be the better player. All he needs are a few better players around him.
And who's going to be your center? Who's their number one center? I mean, I like Brock Nelson, but he profiles as a number 2.
I mean, he's going to be the guy. They don't have a choice.
Right, but then who falls in behind him?
Josh Bailey.
He's not a center, he's a winger.
Pajot.
Yeah.
Pajot could be your number 2, I guess. I mean,
Pajot would be the 2.
Up the line. Are you using Cizikas as your third-line center?
Yes.
He's going to have to be.
Yeah, we guess so. Lots to think about. I think that the idea here is, again, when I bring up these things, they're not in stone. These are just contingency plans I've heard are being mentioned. So whether or not, and I have no
actually, and just to interrupt on that one, Jan, there are a few articles where Trotz actually talked about moving Bailey to center.
He might. I think he profiles as a center, though. That's all.
Yeah.
I don't think he does either, but and I do know Lamoriello loves Patrick Laine like that, and I think he probably likes him more than he likes Barzal. Which is, I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but I'm just saying that he is a Lamoriello type player for some reason. I've heard that. Even though he doesn't pass, he doesn't play much defense at all. I mean, Lou has the thing that you either have to be play a complete full game or be just an absolute dynamite scorer. I mean, look at Lamoriello loves Ilya Kovalchuk. That's like a guy that he's and he's a very specific kind of player, right?
I don't remember any type other than Alexander McGillney. I don't remember any player that played for the Devils that was sort of a black hole like Patrick Laine. Because once you pass it to him, he's going to shoot.
How about
McGillney became a much better all-around player by the time he ended up going to the Devils. He played in all 3 zones on that team.
Exactly. Patrick Elias wasn't that type of player.
No, he was definitely
likes well-rounded players. Now,
to be fair, I don't think Laine has any interest in becoming that guy. He never has.
Well, McGillney was how old when he did it, though? 30?
Right. But it doesn't matter.
Different stages in his career.
Yes.
He's got to be a 40. He's got to be a 40 goal scorer to get the kind of money you got.
But again, Laine will never get 76 goals either.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys, that's all the time we have for today. But thank you so much for watching. Remember to go to patreon.com/hockey to support the show. And remember also that without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you.